everyone. I'm your host, Anika Zubair, and welcome back to the next episode of the Customer Success Pro podcast. I am a customer success executive leader, award-winning CS strategist, CS coach, and customer success fanatic. I help CS leaders and CSMs build and scale world-class CS processes and teams. I'm a strong believer that customer success is not a destination, but a journey. And it can be a tough journey, but don't worry, I'm here to help. This podcast was created to help make your CS journey a little bit easier to navigate. Join me every month on this podcast where we will dive into the hottest topics in CS, the newest strategies, and the best practices in customer success so you can make your CS journey a little bit easier. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast so that you can continue to learn on this CS journey that we are on together. Hey CS Pros, want to win a free pair of AirPods Pro? Our lovely sponsors at Vitally is making it possible for you to win a free pair of AirPods Pro by registering for a qualified demo with them. Vitally is an all-in-one customer success platform that helps CS pros make data-driven decisions, and Vitally gives you a 360 view on measuring customer outcomes at scale by using their goals feature. Goals help you standardize goal setting across your entire team and customers to accurately measure the effectiveness of your process. Don't have goals yet? Don't worry. You can create a goal template easily in Vitally and set goals for accounts or organizations without having to define each one of them from scratch with Vitally. If you want to win those free AirPod Pros, go to vitally.io/CS Pro to schedule your demo or click the link in the show notes of this episode. Welcome back. Today, I'm speaking with Jay Nathan, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Turnkey. He has over 20 years of experience in the software industry and has held previous leadership positions at companies like Blockbird, Higher Logic, and People Matter. He is also a pillar in the customer success community and shares extensively on best practices in SaaS and customer success, as well as sharing his knowledge on The Growth Curve, which is his weekly newsletter. The SaaS world is always evolving, and over the years, it has definitely changed, but so does customer success. And customer success has evolved from support to proactive in the last few years. But CS is an ever-evolving topic, and so are the metrics that matter in customer success. In today's episode, we are going to chat to Jay all about the metrics that are important to track as a CS pro and as a SaaS business, because we all know how important it is to make data-driven decisions. But what data actually matters? Let's chat to Jay all about metrics that he thinks matters in SaaS. So welcome, Jay, to the podcast. I'm so very excited to have you on here with us today. I don't think you really need an introduction, but for those few people out there that might not know who you are and that are listening, can you please give us a little bit of an intro of who you are, what is it you're doing at Turnkey, what your role is, kind of just give us a flavor of everything you've been up to.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, Anika. It's been too long since we caught up. So my name's Jay. I have been in and around the SaaS industry for about 25 years. I won't take you through the whole thing, but I started my career back in like sort of a professional services world in software companies, and that grew into customer success. I worked with publicly traded company for about 9 years here in Charleston, South Carolina, where I live, and then moved into VC-backed companies. I worked in private equity-backed firms. I started my own business consulting in this world from 2017 to about 2020. And then I sold that business to a company called Higher Logic, where I became the chief customer officer, to your point earlier that we were talking about. And I left Higher Logic at the end of 2023. I can't believe it's almost been a year. This year has really gone by fast. And now I'm the chief operating officer at a company called Turnkey. It's an early stage startup, smallest company I've ever been a part of, but one of the coolest. So maybe we can talk about it later. So chief operating officer, but I oversee sales, marketing, customer success at Turnkey. I do a lot with our partnerships. So it's really more of a CRO, CCO, growth strategy kind of role that I have today. And, in a startup, you do.
It's a bit of everything.
Yeah. Uh, I've been from end to end on the spectrum of large, small companies. Maybe I'll throw this in too. Like one of the things I did when I had my own company is I launched a community for chief customer officers and customer success leaders called Gain, Grow, Retain. We ran that for a few years. Ended up that we sold that to Higher Logic. It's now part of Higher Logic. I'm no longer involved with it, but one of the most awesome professional experiences of my life, being able to build that community. I think that's how you and I initially met.
Yeah, exactly.
I've made many lifelong friends through that network and continue to be in touch with those folks. And
I still love those days. It was such a great community. I still remember in the middle of the pandemic having these like success, what were they called? Customer success leadership hours? What were they called?
leadership office hours, yeah.
Leadership office hours. There's the name. Yeah. And I loved it because it was like suddenly connecting with people all over the world that I don't think we would have gotten the opportunity to, which is the power of community. But it was so great. And like you said, we connected through that. But you've had so many roles. And I think even at Turnkey, I've watched you evolve. Like you just said, growth, partnerships. I think you mentioned a few things on LinkedIn as well. And I know you also have your own newsletter now too, which I absolutely love. And I love reading it every week. But there's so many little things that you've dipped into. What kind of led into the trajectory of being chief operating officer? Because I think there's a lot of people listening that are probably used to hearing chief customer officer, chief revenue officer, or even VP of CS. There's like that trajectory, but we're seeing more and more people move into different career trajectories in CS. Why the COO role? What led to that?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. We could talk about it. It's funny. I'm actually writing an article for this weekend's newsletter. Thank you for playing that, by the way, about like what is a CRO, Chief Revenue Officer?
Okay.
What is that all about? And really, my job at Turnkey, this is a company that's been around for 4 years. It's run by 4 awesome founders that have built SaaS companies in the past. They've traditionally built companies and Turnkey was initially built for smaller companies, really quick startup, sort of the SMB. I'm familiar with that world, but I wasn't like really, really close to it until I came to Turnkey. Certainly not the ins and outs of the sales motions. Where my strength is a little bit more upmarket. So like mid-market, commercial accounts, enterprise customers. And, actually even prior to Turnkey, before I left Higher Logic, I was running a business unit where I was responsible for sales, marketing, product management, and all the customer functions of the business that I ran, the part of the business that I ran.
Yep.
So, I had sort of begun to make this evolution toward, I guess you call it a GM or chief operations officer for a business unit. Or even maybe you can even think of it as like a CEO or an executive director for a business unit itself. So I had responsibility for the sales number, the pipeline, all that good stuff. So my career has migrated toward revenue ever since I, owned my own business back starting in 2017.
Yep.
When you own your own business, you are in sales. That is your
100%.
You kill what you eat, right? Depending on the type of business that you're in, to be sort of crass. But so I think the evolution has been natural for me. I came from early days in my career being an engineer, hands-on developer,
Mm-hmm.
and they just couldn't keep me away from the customers. And so I always would spend more time with the customers, and that naturally led into being part of sales teams, sales support teams, even from the technical side of things. So I've always sort of gravitated toward the business development side of the world. But, COO, when you're in a company as early as Turnkey is, it's just like really what makes the most sense right now for my title to be. And we just laid it on COO. We don't need a chief revenue officer. We don't really need a chief operating officer, but it's a good title for me right now. And we have lots of flexibility around that. But I, again, oversee sales, some of the marketing efforts that we do, and help contribute to product and customer strategy. And so we thought COO, hey, it works.
Cool. Love it. I just love the evolution of every customer success professional's journey. I think it's really unique. I think that's what makes CS unique, is all of us come from such varied backgrounds, but we're also trying to achieve a number of things while building companies as we are in the startup world. But it's really cool. I love hearing everyone's backstory. I think it's really unique. And it's also cool to just see how you've evolved. Like I said, I've seen you like build your business, but then sell it. And then all the same time, like now launch with a new startup. It's really exciting. And you mentioned that you're running a few different teams all under this chief operating officer umbrella. So you mentioned partnerships, you mentioned operations, you mentioned customer. There's a whole bunch growth, a whole bunch in there. Tell us a little bit more about Turnkey itself and the company and the team and what you're kind of held accountable to there.
Yeah, sure. So Turnkey is a lot of people get confused with Churn Zero. We're not actually
I almost said that, by the way. I almost naturally wanted to say it, but it's not. It's turnkey. It's turnkey.
It would be totally understandable if you did. People do it all the time. We're not a customer success platform. We're actually much more targeted and focused. So we call ourselves a retention automation platform for high volume subscription companies. So think about PLG SaaS companies where you can go online, you can buy, you can onboard and activate right there, like real quick, right? Those are the kind of customers that we serve. About 80% of our customers are PLG SaaS companies, but we also have other customers that sell their products and services on subscription. So consumer services, media, all kinds of different businesses that are sort of membership based. One funny example, actually not a funny example, one really interesting example. We have two really big car wash chains out of the Northeast that are, let's just say one of them is over a 9-figure business in terms of ARR, and they have a chain of car washes that they sell car washes on a membership basis. Well, guess what? That's a subscription.
That is. Who would have thought a car wash is part of a subscription business?
It is. It is. It's part of the subscription industry. And so as this business model continues to sort of permeate the world, like we're in a really good position to be there because as you know, and as probably most of your listeners know, when you're in a subscription environment, in the subscription economy, retaining customers is so critical. So how do we do that? We handle the cancel flow portion of the customer journey, and then we do failed payment recovery as well. So when you charge a bunch of credit cards every month, you're going to pretty reliably get 10 or 20% failure rate. We help recover those failed payments so that you can keep the customer in good standing, keep their subscription going, keep that ARR, that MRR flowing. That's what we do.
Yeah, I love that. You cover so many things as well, and both in your role, but also as a product. So I know that when we get into these metrics that matter in SaaS and starting to talk about that, I think it's going to be really interesting because you talked about not only retaining customers, but like offboarding or possible retention of funds because of a customer not paying. So that's really interesting. But before we dive into the actual topic, I always like to ask each of my guests a question. And I want to ask you this because you've had such an interesting career trajectory, but what is your next career dream or ambition? You've launched a business, you've sold a business, you've gone into the C-suite. There's so many things you've done, Jay. I'm just so curious. What would be next for you, really? I mean, you're now at a startup, which is opposite to what you've done before as well. So if you were to look 5-10 years down in the future, what was your next career ambition be?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know. When you say interesting career, I worry oh boy.
No. I mean, you had a great ride. I would say from an outside perspective, it's been a wild ride, but it's awesome to see. You literally have launched and sold things. You built your own business. I think you've had great success. So it's been interesting to watch as an outsider. That's what I meant.
Thank you. I was shooting for the compliment there. My parents were entrepreneurs. I've always felt like an entrepreneur at heart, and getting to see inside of a smaller, earlier stage startup. We have 4 founders at Turnkey. These guys are awesome. I say guys because they actually are all guys in this case. But I don't know if I'm like a founder like these guys are. This is a different breed. They are differently, and there's a really good thing about that. But I do consider myself an entrepreneur, and I've always been the sort of the person that thinks differently inside of a bigger company. But anyway, to shortcut the answer to your question, I see myself owning businesses more than being an operator forever. Maybe someday I'll go back to being a chief customer officer because I like that role. I think there's a lot of value that a CCO can provide, but I'll always want to have my hands in the commercial side of the business too, because it's just not that interesting to me. If you aren't helping drive revenue in some way, you aren't figuring out the market in some way. So I just get really geeked out about businesses and how they go to market and how they sustain themselves, how they grow. And so I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where life takes me. But I'm having a lot of fun right now.
Yeah.
I like to have my hands on a lot of different things. So you'll probably see me continue to show up in maybe different places over time.
I think it's going to be a huge success, whichever way you go, Jay, because I've been loving watching it from the outside, and it's been an awesome ride from the outside as well. That's why I said interesting. So it's going to be great, I'm sure. And
Thank you.
let's dive into the actual topic, which is metrics that matter. And I think that you just said something that really resonates a lot about owning the revenue piece. I think that that's funnily something that's coming up more and more in CS at the moment, and probably more and more in SaaS businesses that are recognizing that CS are revenue drivers, not just a cost center. I think that this has been something that's been bubbling up for a number of years now as we moved from like reactive to proactive CS. But there have been tons of metrics over the years that SaaS companies have been focused on. And it's been crazy to watch the evolution over the last 10 years on what actually matters when it comes to SaaS metrics. And we're going to dive in deeper into specifically what you track, but maybe for just getting us into this topic, can you maybe break down like what you think is the top 3 or 5 metrics that matter the most across a business? And then we'll get into the customer success side of things. But I know there's so many, but if I was, again, a founder right now and came to you as that entrepreneur, what would be the most important metrics to really track?
Well, even before we sort of dive into that, you got to think about what the objective of these businesses is. Okay. So every business has investors. Every investor is looking for a return on their investment. The investors could be the owners. By the way, Turnkey, for example, is a bootstrapped company, which means the founders own most of the company. They built it off of customer revenue, right? Which is awesome. We've taken some small investments since they got it off the ground, but that's a different kind of business. Then you've got VC firms, right? Go big or go home. Raise enough, get some traction, raise enough money to go win your spot in the market, and then really put your foot on the gas and grow fast.
Yeah.
You got private equity based companies who come in. They might buy a significant portion of the business. They want to get it, profitable, efficient, increase the value 3 to 5 times, and then they can exit in 3 to 7 years. And then you've got publicly traded companies, right? Which are, we're in for the long haul, sort of, but we have a very tight quarterly focus on efficiency, on growth, and that kind of thing. But if you look at the common denominator behind all of these businesses, there's one thing that matters more than anything else to all these businesses, and that is growth.
Yeah.
Okay. That is growth. And that is top line revenue growth, period over period, quarter over quarter, year over year. So that's number one. And we all know, right? Your listeners, I know, are savvy. They know that growth in a SaaS business is made up of a few things. It's made up of retention first. Mm-hmm. It's made up of expansion for your customers. And then it's made up of new sales on top of that, right? New logos. So those are sort of the 3 key things that matter on the growth side. Increasingly, especially over the past 2 or 3 years, we've gone from this mentality of growth at all costs, and I like to say retention at all costs, to profitable and efficient growth. So now you see also things like gross margin, operating margin, and EBITDA becoming more and more important because we don't have unlimited cash like we used to have, right? We can't spend money, we can't spend $3 to make $1 or $5 to make $1 like we used to be able to. It's now got to be closer to 1 to 1, right? Over time. And then we know that the lifetime value of the customer is going to, pay us back plus some over time. So, when you look at the fundamentals of business, that's what we're really talking about. We're talking about top line revenue, the components that make that up, the growth rate, and then underlying that, the profitability. And those are the things that owners of businesses that like we work in, those are things that they look at.
Yeah, definitely. I love that you just mentioned both top line growth as well as the actual revenue or profits for a company as well. Because like you just said, it's no longer like cash is cheap anymore. It's no longer, hey, we need to grow, so let's just go raise some money. It's now really looking at what is the long-term value of a customer? What is our run rate when we're currently looking at the profits that we are bringing in? It's so much more than that. And it's so important and crucial for everyone to understand, especially CS leaders and CS professionals listening. It's like, you're no longer just running and serving this grand service of seeing customers successful with your product, there is a revenue aspect to your role. And there's also a revenue aspect to the company that you're serving both as. And I think that that's really crucial for everyone to understand. But another metric that I know that gets tossed around in CS a lot, and you mentioned it just earlier, is like customer lifetime value. I think that that gets thrown around a lot by SaaS businesses. And I think it's assumed that most people know what CLV is or how it's crucial and how it's calculated. Are you guys, or I'm sure you have before, but how are you using customer lifetime value to really articulate value within your CS org or even the wider business?
Yeah, lifetime value and cost of customer acquisition. There's a ratio called LTV to CAC, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
what do we expect the lifetime value of a customer to be? Is it 5 years at $10,000 a year, and then how much does it cost us to acquire that customer? Maybe it's 10,000, maybe it's 25,000, right? You could do the math on that. So the thing about those metrics, or that metric in particular, is that they're not really operational metrics. They're very difficult to use to run your business. They're good for investors to look at, to understand the characteristics of the business, and they're good for executives to think about the investments that they can make in certain types of acquisition decisions, right? So for example, at Turnkey, once we get a customer on and they're using our platform and they're seeing the value out of it, we're going to keep that customer for years and years and years, right? So our retention rate is, this is awesome. Like we have a 95, actually more like 97% gross retention rate in our business.
So crazy. That's awesome. That is so cool.
Once you turn us on, you do not want to turn us off, because we help drive top line revenue. It's amazing. But that is much different than a business that might sell monthly subscriptions, in which you can turn them off, and maybe they're seasonal buyers. You see a lot of maybe training and education companies that fall into this category, where people may come on and use the platform for 3 months and then they cancel. That's not really a full-blown recurring business. If you're having to replace your customer base multiple times within a year, it impacts what you can spend on going to acquire those customers, right?
Definitely.
So, we look at things like, in our business, we look at things like, where do we need to go show up? Can we go to events and try to acquire customers at an event? Well, events are expensive, right? They're really expensive to go attend. But, looking at the types of companies that might be there that may become our customers, we can justify it, because we know if we pick up 2 customers and we keep them for the next 7 to 10 years, they're going to pay the event expense back many, many, many times over before they leave us, right?
Yeah.
And so those kind of things, if you understand the lifetime value of your customer base, and you can use that information to make decisions on how you get more customers, essentially.
So do you think it's a strategic decision-making metric, CLV? Or do you think it's more around the retention piece that you were talking about earlier, about how you're really concerned about retention revenue, and then again, building that retention playbook? But would you consider customer lifetime value more for high level business decisions, and then retention rate for more of those strategic daily decisions?
Yeah, I would. Okay, so let's pick lifetime value apart a little bit, right?
Yep.
Because that's a metric. That's a compound metric. Compound metric means it's made up of multiple metrics. And by the way, this is what makes it not a great day-to-day operational metric.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you get too many things coming together to make one metric, well, then what is it, right?
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Lifetime value is made up of typically gross margin, meaning we're not counting the top line ARR, we're counting the gross margin, and we're counting the retention rate. So if you, do the math, it's like the gross margin adjusted revenue. So ARR minus the cost of goods sold, and you divide that by the churn rate, then you will get the lifetime value. Okay. So how do you control for that? How do you use that to do something meaningful? Well, you really can't, right? You can control your gross margin, and you can say, hey, look, I need to make more gross profit per customer. So I need to reduce my cost of goods sold. I might have to have fewer people delivering it. Maybe my product needs to be more efficient, use less of our AWS and Google Cloud services, right? Or the other way to extend lifetime value is I can make the retention rate longer, because remember, I divided by gross retention.
Yeah. Yeah.
So sorry, we're getting
I
mathematical
know we're
here.
getting really geeking out here on this equation here.
But this is what people need to understand. When people throw around terms like lifetime value and LTV to CAC, these are not operational metrics that you can just manage against day to day. What you should be thinking about, what I should be thinking about every day is, what is our gross retention rate, right? And what is a leading indicator to gross retention? Well, it's probably renewal, right? Renewal rate. So, and then what is a leading indicator to renewal rate? Well, it's probably what's the value the customer is getting? How often do they use the product? All the things that we start to think about from a customer success perspective then begin to come into focus as leading indicators to renewal and retention rate. That's how you impact lifetime value. A lot of these things are determined, they really aren't determined by the customer success team. And that might be a little bit of a controversial thing, but they're determined by where you decide to play. What market are you in? Are you serving a B2C industry? I once worked with a company that sold their product to real estate agents.
Okay.
Those are businesses, right? But they're more like prosumer businesses. They behave a lot like B2C. Okay. So retention rate was not anywhere near where we would want it to be in a sort of a quote unquote healthy SaaS business. You want 90% plus gross retention rate, right?
Yeah.
Well, the retention rate is only going to be so high in that business because of the end market that they serve, right? There's a ceiling on it. Will they ever get to 90%? Probably not, right? And a lot of it is out of their control because a lot of those people come in and out of the market. A lot of those customers come in and out of the market. They're not even businesses a year from now, much less your customer. So some of this is baked into the market you serve. Some of it's baked into the product that you deliver to the market. And it's a question of product market fit and business viability in the long run. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. And I think we talk more about customer lifetime value as, again, like the overarching, and then there's levers that you can pull to make your customer lifetime value either longer or extended or change it depending on what the metrics make sense. You mentioned gross revenue retention and renewal rates and just, again, how you can upsell or maybe renew your existing customer base. And I think that that's really where SaaS businesses need to play, like you say, in an operational day-to-day level to make sure that you're driving that customer lifetime value in the long run. But thinking of the day-to-day and the operational metrics and key metrics to track in that way, would you say GRR and like retention rate is more critical at that point then to really define how you're working as a customer success org, or are there other potential expansion metrics that matter at this point?
Yeah, great question. So we throw around gross retention rate. We also throw around another one, right? Net retention rate.
Yeah, I almost forget NRR. Yeah.
NRR is a big time comp bell metric, right? Because it's not just one thing. It's your gross retention rate and it's your expansion sales to existing customers added into that. So I think all of these are lagging metrics, right? Anything that shows up in your financial statements, like your income statement, is sort of a lagging metric. The question is like, how can you tell as a leader if you're going to be able to make an impact on that? That might get measured once per quarter for a lot of companies, right? Maybe once a month if your business is higher velocity.
Yeah.
But even then, how can you tell that you're making an impact on it?
Yeah.
So I would say that for most leaders in customer success, you need to have something deeper than gross retention rate that drives your day to day, right? So I'll ask you this, and maybe I don't know if you can share this or not, but like, what is the thing that you could go do with your customers today?
Yeah.
That would be a good leading indicator, the activity that your team could go do at scale.
Yeah.
That they could do that would move the needle. If everybody did it and did it right and did it well, what would move the needle on renewal rates? First of all, we know that leads to retention, right? Retention rate.
Yeah.
What would that activity be? And you don't have to answer for your current company, answer for another company.
No, it's okay. I love that you're asking me questions now. This is a great podcast. I would say time to first revenue is what we are tracking. And the main reason is, we're a financial institute. We're tracking, like, again, consumption or transactions. And for us, when we see our customers transact quickly as possible once they're onboarded onto our platform, that is when they're true. Because when they transact, they get a piece of that revenue, and so do we. And for us, that just makes sense. And so getting them there quicker means they're seeing value quicker. So I think a lot of businesses usually call it time to first value or time to first revenue, whatever it is. But that is for us the very key first metric operationally that we're able to really tell, okay, if they're seeing it in 30 days or less, we know that there's no issue with the renewal at that point.
Okay. Love it. Now, what could you go do to make sure, like, what is the one thing your team could do? If they go do one thing, you say your only job is this, what would be the one thing that gets them to that 30-day activation target that you just noted?
I would say that they'd probably make sure that they're showcasing and engaging how to get on the product as quickly as possible, and how that getting on the product and using those transactions would lead to their business growth, meaning like they're going to see a revenue impact in their company if they get to that first metric as soon as possible.
Okay. And you show them that how? You get them on a webinar? Do you get them on
a call? We usually do it in calls. Or an enterprise base. So it's a one-to-one call with each one of our customers to really walk them through our platform, but also the value of once they start to transact as well.
Okay. So there's a conversion there, right?
Yeah.
Somebody sold them, right? They came across the line. You're going to onboard them. And now your number one job, and you just told me, your number one job is to get them activated within 30 days. And the most important thing you could do, I'm not trying to be a consultant here.
You are at this point, but it's all good.
But the most important thing you can do is get them on a call and convert them again, right? So the leading indicator that I would choose for that team, probably like an activation, or first, can I get people to show up for the call?
Yep. Yeah.
Metric one.
Step one. Mm-hmm.
Right? You get, time kills all deals, right? Is what you're
yeah, for sure. If you don't have an engaged customer, that's a real problem.
That's right. So you don't want the call. That's milestone number one. Milestone number two, get their commitment on that call. When are they going to go live, right? When are they going to do the configuration thing? You and I, it seems like we have similar businesses. If we get our customers on these calls and we have them walk through the steps and they do the steps,
yep,
it'll be sticky for a long time.
For a long time. Because once they're transacting, there's the ROI just shows itself.
You don't go backwards, right?
Yep.
You don't go backwards. Yeah.
Yep.
No, I think we have very similar businesses there. But so that is the level of detail that customer success leaders need to be getting into. Because if you try to track GRR, what is that going to tell you of what really matters? We just talked about what really matters, right? The leading indicators. So I would encourage people to think about gross retention and just systematically back up. What is the crux of the problem? Like, what is the crux of getting the customer across that threshold to doing the thing you need them to do, that you know that if they do it, they will be successful and you will activate them on time and have them as a customer for life.
Yeah. I love
That's
that.
what I think about metrics.
I love it. I love how we just reversed this podcast and you kind of helping consult and give an answer while consulting with my team as well. So I love that. But I agree. There's so many things that we think about that are like the big picture, like NRR, GRR, top line revenue growth, everything that we've talked about so far in this podcast, all very important, all great for your board reports, all great for high level reporting and understanding. But sometimes you got to get into the nitty gritty and the very basic steps of reporting and metrics that matter, which is for my team, it was that first time to revenue. But like you just said, even that first milestone of getting a customer on a call, that is a milestone. And if you can get that done, then you know you're affecting GRR down the line or NRR down the line as well. So I love that. That was a great example of that, Jay.
Yeah. And I would say, like, every day, like, that's the level of detail and focus. If customer success leaders want a seat at the table and they want to be seen as business leaders, which I desperately want all CS leaders to be seen as business leaders today.
Definitely. Yep.
Then that is what you do. You've got to get into the weeds. So anyway, sorry, I'll get off myself.
No worries. I love that. I love how we veered off there. But also, I think a lot of times, like you just said, getting that seat at the table, and customer success leaders are often probably overwhelmed by like metrics and operational metrics and also business metrics like EBITDA. I knew it, but I think that there's a lot of people out there that are like, what's a P&L? What's EBITDA? There's just business overall operational and business metrics that matter that CS pros should at least know or maybe even educate themselves on outside of work or even in work? I think it's the best place to learn. But what do you think are some of the metrics outside of the bubble of customer success that are important to measure and track within SaaS businesses and CS leaders should look to track?
Well, we've talked about the high level stuff, but every part of the business has different metrics, right? So look at the entire customer life cycle, right? And I'm talking about, when you think about it, when I say customer there, I really mean the kind of person, the kind of company you want to do business with, right? So it's not just customers, prospects too. You've got to get their attention. You have to get them to, you have to capture them as somebody who's got an interest, right? You have to be able to convert them when they do show interest. So like even just that alone, we're getting into like the go-to-market funnels, right? Like how do you get their attention, capture their attention and walk them through a process very similar to what we just talked about, right? The onboarding process is a funnel in and of itself, but there are funnels way upstream of like, okay, how did this person even hear about us, right? In the first place? And how efficient was it to get them to hear about us? And then how efficiently do we get them to convert from being somebody who understands the problem we solve, understands that they have that problem, understands our solution to that problem, is willing to put their trust in us as the solution provider for that problem, and then convert into the onboarding funnel from there, right? So that's just one part of it. I mean, there are funnels all over the organization if you think about it that way. I mean, on the back end, you've got renewals, but you've got product development funnels. You can look at product development the same way, right? You can look at, HR and compliance and enablement for your team the same way. But so you really, I think we got to be more specific, like what part of the customer journey or what part of the business are we talking about? And then you dive in at the very deepest level, like we just did.
Yeah. And the granularity. Yeah.
But
I love that.
It matters everywhere. It matters everywhere. People think that strategy is something you come up with up here and then you like roll it out and then it's just working.
I wish. I'm just thinking like, how great would businesses be if that's the way you actually run them? Like one big strategy, and it's like, oh, snap your fingers and we're all good. But that's far from how strategy is built.
Right. Strategy is actually built. I mean, you can have ideas, but then you have to find ways of executing, right? You have to execute, measure, repeat, and iterate. You can look at any of the businesses that we all, look at and revere. Look at Amazon, look at Apple, look at, I study Costco and Walmart a lot. These are amazing businesses. They didn't just come up with these things and get it right the first time. They executed every single day, trying to solve the problem, finding the crux of the problem at the moment, solving it, and then incorporated that into how they operate as business when they got it right, and then went on to the next problem. So, I always encourage it. There's a couple of books. There's an author named Richard Rummelt who wrote a book called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, which I would highly recommend to all of your listeners. He wrote another book called The Crux during the pandemic, which is a great, actually, check this out. I got Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. I like it so much that I'm listening to books, Anika. But I like this one so much. I wanted a copy of it sitting on my desk here. But it really goes into this idea that, strategy is not something that just comes out of the ether. It comes from doing, comes from actually executing. And so, no matter what part of the business you're talking about, you have to go actually do the work.
I love that you said that because a lot of people think it's just like, oh, fluffy and you've got it. And then you just go with it, which I think in startups, it's really evident. Like you have to go in and get into the weeds. You've got to get your hands dirty. You've got to just get involved to really come up with the metrics that matter within your business at a startup. But you've had the unique career experience that you've just shared with us where you've been at startups, you've been at major organizations, and you've seen from the whole evolution of like scale of startup to enterprise and beyond. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about some of the metrics that maybe either change or evolve or adapt as you grow as a business. Because I'm sure what you're tracking today, like you said, the strategy you have today is not going to apply 5 years from now. So how do you go in with the mindset of changing or adapting or really making sure the metrics matter at the moment that they do as you grow as a business?
So the top level metrics never change, right? The top metrics are always going to be the same: growth, profitability, and the key components of that. Now, what does change is the metrics that you use to measure the strategy that you have at any given point in time, right? We know that the world is changing around us constantly, right? Especially in SaaS. We have so many competitors in a SaaS business.
It's crazy. It's wild.
Competitors, the market changes. You're in a regulated industry, right? So regulation changes, things change around us all the time. So, I won't get on a soapbox about change, but you've got to figure out what your plan is. So strategy is nothing more than like, what is my plan to win this year? And what does winning look like? Well, it might be hitting a number. It might mean, getting certain penetration into a new portion of the market. But whatever the plan is to drive that growth or to drive that profitability, then you figure out what to measure underneath it, right? So you might look at let's go back to your onboarding piece or even the gross retention, right? You might look at those top level metrics and say, okay, like we came into this year at 85% gross retention. We really want to try to push that up to 87%. So what are we going to do? We're going to go peel apart all the churn you've had for the past 24 months.
Yeah.
And we're going to say, okay, what's controllable? What's not controllable?
Mm-hmm.
The controllable. What are the components that make up the controllable? Is it product feedback? Was it service issues? Was it slow onboarding? Was it competitors that were coming in and eating our lunch? Like, what was it? Like, specifically, there's probably only 4 or 5 of them. It's not that many. But we need to know every account we lost, why did we lose it?
Yeah.
So our goal is to get that GRR number up. But once we know what the actual problem is, then you build a metric around how do we go solve that problem. So let's say it was, okay, 50% of our customers aren't getting onboarded within 30 days, and it's causing retention to suffer. We know that that's a factor, right? In customer success, we know if you don't, like you've said, if you don't onboard your customers on time, chances are higher that they're going to fail.
Yeah, definitely.
Then what are you going to go measure to say, okay, we're going to solve that problem over the next 2 quarters? What are we going to go measure to do that?
Yeah.
Right.
I love that you mentioned change, by the way, because I think that, like you just said, it's the only constant, and SaaS is changing so much, but so is customer success. Sometimes I feel like it gives me whiplash year to year, what we're tracking and what we're measuring. But I think that there are lots of early tells or, let's say, trends in the SaaS world that kind of give us an idea of what to start to pay attention to and what to start to track. You mentioned a few things that are lagging indicators. What do you think would be like the future leading indicators of a successful SaaS or CS organization that we should start paying attention to now? Are you seeing anything bubble up in the industry?
What I'm saying to you, Anika, is that it's different for everybody. The leading indicators are different for everybody. We know that there's some standard ones, right?
Yeah.
Time to value is a leading indicator. One of the things I think is interesting that's happening right now is there's a lot of companies that are flipping from subscription model to consumption-based models. One trend, right? We know AI is playing a role in how quickly products can be built and rolled out, that kind of thing. So, but as we go to more of a consumption-based model, I do think some of the leading indicators are going to change, and they're more akin to adoption and value than probably even make sense on the subscription side. Right? Because we know if it's consumption-based or metered usage of some sort, that we're not going to get paid unless the customer's really doing well with that product. So then it becomes all about adoption. How do you get them to use more, right? How do you get them to run more transactions through your product? How do I get them to run more transactions through Turnkey, right?
Yeah.
It's not e-price. I don't know if it's how you price either. But so then that becomes the leading indicator. And then if you have people doing this kind of work, which customer success teams often do, then what is the thing that you need them to do to get the outcome that you want? Is it get on the phone calls? Is it convince them to give you a date on which they're going to start production usage of your product? Then those are your leading indicators. So if you sort of abstract everything that I'm saying here, I'll make a bigger point. To me, the most important indicator of whether a team like this is going to be successful or not is how agile they are at doing this process, which I'm talking through right now, which is taking the end goal, figuring out why we're not hitting the end goal, and then building a strategy over for the next 2 to 3 quarters that say, okay, we're going to go do this and try to move the metric, and we're going to measure it. Like, it's that cycle that's important. more so than any one given metric, because that's going to change. All the leading indicators are going to change all the time,
Yeah,
right?
definitely. Definitely. I love that you said the golden thing there of like, it all depends, which is, I know what we say. It's like a broken record in customer success. It totally depends on your business, the maturity of your customer, the maturity of your product. It all really depends on, again, where you're at, and the top line metric won't change. But what you just said, every quarter, the activities you're doing, the tracking, the things that you're actually measuring, and what you can do to move the needle on those measures will change based on, again, the operational tactical things that you are doing. So I love that you shared that. And it's really important for everyone to hear those things, because those big metrics that matter always will matter. But the things you're doing today, tomorrow, next week are what's really going to drive those metrics forward. Um, Listen, Jay, I have loved all the talk around metrics, and we could keep talking, but I do have one more question before we go into Quickfire, which is looking back at your career and also the businesses you've built and the teams you've built. Like, what's one piece of advice you'd give yourself when it comes to selecting or tracking or acting on some of the metrics and topics that we talked about today? What, if you look back at your career, what would you give yourself advice on?
It's very easy to get overwhelmed with too many metrics. I've been part of companies before where they had, this OKR dashboard of, 600 metrics. And
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, exactly. Across all the business. It's just too much, right? At any given point in time, find the one thing that matters most and focus on it. And don't ever take it for granted, would be the other advice I would give you, or I would give listeners. Don't ever take that one metric for granted. Just because somebody handed you a metric, you should validate that is still the right metric to be looking at, because it's easy to just operate with the assumptions we've always had while the world's changing around us, like we've talked about, and miss something, right? There's one more quote that I think is really, I love this quote. Jeff Bezos said, if there's a discrepancy between the metric and the anecdotes, I always believe the anecdotes. So if people are telling you, hey, the metrics look good, support's running fine, or onboarding is great, well, I hear, somebody on the other side say, well, we've got all these challenges and the customers are complaining. They're giving me anecdotes about how poorly it's actually going for them. Dig into it. So that would be the thing. Don't be afraid to dig into the anecdotes.
I love that. There's so many good takeaways there, Jay. Thank you for sharing. Okay, we're going to wrap up with the quick fire questions, where I challenge all my guests to try to answer these next questions in a sentence or less. It's tough, I know, but I'm going to challenge you, Jay. Are you ready?
Right. I'm ready. I'm doing it.
Okay, one sentence. First question. If you could predict the future, what do you think is next for CS next year?
CS is going to become more of a business function and less of a customer function.
Ooh. We could have a whole podcast on that topic, but I have to stick to one sentence. There's rules to these questions. Okay, cool. The next question is, which app or software do you use every day, every week, either on your phone or your laptop, and why?
I use the Notes app on my iPad.
Okay. It's a great app. It's super simple and it captures everything.
And the thing is so good on it now. So.
Awesome. Next question is, if you could change one thing about customer success, what would it be?
It would be that people need to realize there's a dual mandate, one to the business and two to the customer.
Oh, Jay, I wish I could just clap out loud to these answers. I love it. I love it. I say it all the time, to my CSMs. I'm like, you're serving two needs, one for the business and one to your customers. I love it. Awesome. Last question, Jay, is who should be my next podcast guest?
Oh man, I wish I had time to prepare for that one. Let's see. I've got a little recency bias going on right now, but I was just on the phone with my buddy, Dave Jackson out of the UK. Right? Have you had him on before?
I've never, but I should have Dave on. Dave's just down the road. I should call Dave.
Yeah, all day.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you so much, Jay, for sharing all your insights, your transparency, your just knowledge is amazing with everything that you've shared. So I really appreciate your time. If our podcast listeners have any other questions and want to reach out, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Sure. You can reach me on LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm on there, every day. I respond to messages there. I will also plug growthcurve.io, which is our newsletter. And by the way, we have a financial intelligence course that we built for folks there. We'll give your listeners a discount if you want to pass that on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely. I'll link everything in the show notes for everyone so that you can follow up with Jay, subscribe to the newsletter. I love it. I read it every week. And then also check out his course as well. But thank you so much, Jay. Again, really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Thank you for listening to the Customer Success Pro podcast today. I hope you learned something new to take back to your team and your company. If you enjoyed today's episode, please can you take 1 minute to give me a positive review on Apple Podcasts? It takes a lot of time and energy to create an episode, and I want to continue to create more for you. But it would be great to know that you are enjoying these episodes. Also, do not forget to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast, as I release a new podcast every month. And if you have any topics that you would like me to discuss in the future, or you would like to be a guest on this podcast, please feel free to reach out. All my contact details are in the show notes. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to share it, because sharing is caring. Thanks again for listening, and tune in next time for more on customer success. Cheers to your CS journey, and catch you next time.